I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, everyone. Thanks once again for joining me. Welcome back to the show. Before we go ahead and get into the rest of our show, just want to remind you guys that if you have any questions or any comments or anything like that, you can always hit up our super chat on GSMCSports.net, and you can type in your question or your comment, and we will get to it as soon as I see it on here. So once again, that's GSMCSports.net. If you have a super chat, a question, comment, anything like that, always appreciated. So let's go ahead and get into the rest of our show here. We're going to continue on. These are the last couple season outlooks that we've got for you guys. And we're going to be talking about the San Francisco 49ers as we finish up the NFC West and the NFL in general. We are finally going to be done with this series. It's been a long journey. It's been fun to talk about each and every one of the teams and, dive into all in depth of, things that they've done, things that they need to do. And, it'll be interesting to see what all these, teams turn out to be like, see if I'm hitting on any of the records, predictions that I'm putting out here. So going on to the San Francisco 49ers, taking a look at what they did last year, was not the greatest year for them. They had a lot of injuries that they had to deal with. They finished 6-11 overall. They were last in the NFC West, and of course, they were missing one of the key players that they were missing was Christian McCaffrey. He only ended up playing in 4 games. He came back. He was out for a good chunk of the year. Came back against Buffalo. Ended up getting hurt again against Buffalo, and then we didn't see him again after that. So, it's a tough, a tough pill to swallow if you're the 49ers losing a guy like that, because he makes a lot of what they do well on offense go. He's that good. He can catch out of the backfield. He's elusive. He's got great vision. Everybody knows how good Christian McCaffrey is. So, it's also always sad to see a guy like that not be able to come in and contribute to his team, especially how good of a player he is. So it was unfortunate. They also dealt with a big injury to Brandon Ayuk, and that hurt on multiple levels if you're a 49ers fan, because not only is Brandon Ayuk one of the best receivers in the league, and of course not having him is, not a good thing, obviously, but there was all this offseason talk, the previous offseason, of if Brandon Ayuk was even going to return, because he wanted a new deal from San Francisco. There was talk that he could get moved to either the Commanders. I know the Steelers were in on him for a while. But ultimately, he did end up, after a long period of negotiating and all that, he ended up going back to San Francisco and got his extension. And then the year he gets his extension, he gets the ACL injury and he's out for the year. So it hurts on a lot of different levels if you're a 49er fan. Also, Deebo Samuel was kind of in and out of the lineup as well. He had sort of a down year in, his standards. He's declined over the past couple of years in terms of, stats-wise. But I do think him moving on to Washington will be a good thing for him because it's a fresh start, and I think he'll do well with a fresh start and a dynamic offense that they have in Washington. Obviously, the 49ers still have one of the better tight ends in the league in George Kittle. He was still productive last year. He led the team in receiving. He led them in yards and touchdowns. Both had over 1,000 yards receiving, 8 touchdowns. He was very effective for the 49ers, as he always is. Another good bright spot for this offense, and there weren't a ton of bright spots for the 49ers overall, but having Jawan Jennings was a standout as well, because he made a lot of big plays after Brandon Ayuk went down. So that was good for him and good for the 49ers as well. He finished with just under 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns, so just 2 behind George Kittle, who led the team, as I said before. Also, just to continue all the injury talk, the 49ers were also without their draft pick, their first-round draft pick. I believe he was a first-rounder, but wide receiver Ricky Pearsall, who actually ended up missing 6 games because he got shot in the chest in the offseason. And the fact that he was able to even come back and, survive that, first of all, is, a miracle in itself. But, to be able to come back and play football and play 6 games, that's just a testament to how tough he is, and it was really good to see him back in the game, back on the field, and healthy and safe and all that. So good situation there, and he should be back next year, hopefully being more productive, with a more steady slate of games that he gets a chance to play in, as opposed to just the 6 that he played in last year. The defense, they're typically always good. They were decent last year. Fred Warner is still an absolute beast. He led the team in interceptions and in tackles. So he was, of course, one of the bright spots of that defense. But again, they had a lot of injuries on defense too. Hufanga, their safety, who is no longer with them, he's with Denver now. He was hurt a good chunk of last year as well. So, he's their starting safety, and that was a big loss when he was out. But overall, they were ranked 8th, in total yards allowed per game, 5th in passing yards allowed per game as well. So they were top 10 in just in terms of yardage, but they gave up a little bit more points than you would like. They gave up about 26 points per game, which was good for 27th in the league. So not where you want to be, especially when your offense is struggling a little bit with, injuries and all that mess that they had to deal with last year. In terms of what some of their needs are, they got a lot of different needs, They lost a lot of players in free agency, so they obviously want to rebuild a little bit. It seems like it's not necessarily a rebuild year for the 49ers, but they're bringing in a lot of new pieces just by necessity, from losing a lot of guys. But also another issue, I think, is, their biggest need, of course, is on defense, and it's defensive tackle. So they could probably address that in the NFL draft. But another position that you want to potentially look at is Trent Williams at the tackle position. Obviously, Trent Williams is a Hall of Famer. There's nobody denies how great of a tackle that he has been his entire career, but he is turning 37, so you need to start thinking about somebody who's going to be his replacement going forward. So he's obviously going to be the starter until he decides to retire. I believe he's earned that right, and he's still productive. He's still a very, very good tackle. So I think they need to get younger at that position, though, and maybe get a guy and have him learn behind arguably one of the best, if not, you could make the argument that he is the best tackle of all time, possibly. I mean, he's that good, that much of a lockdown offensive lineman. You don't see too much, consistent domination out of that position like you do with Trent Williams. And not to mention, he's intimidating on the field. He's a mammoth guy, massive human being, and he's very intimidating, and he's not afraid to, he's not afraid to, get in someone's face. We've seen it multiple times. And we've actually even seen sometimes some players will make business decisions if Trent Williams is angry, and they will just stay clear of him. We see him on some of the replays. It's just kind of funny because he's just an intimidating guy, big guy, great offensive tackle. So still need to find a replacement for him for whenever he decides to hang it up, though. And running back, I would also consider looking at in the draft, because there's a lot of good running backs that you don't necessarily have to draft in the first round to get a quality running back in this draft. We've went over that numerous times over the course of the past week or so. But the departure of Jordan Mason, their backup running back, who got a majority of the carries last year because of Christian McCaffrey's injury, he is now gone. He is in Minnesota. So they need a little bit of extra depth at that position. I could see them going in the draft maybe on day 2 or 3 to take a running back. Don't think they do it in the first round. It's not that pressing of a need because you're not going to draft a guy that's going to replace Christian McCaffrey this year. So, you're just going a guy that's going to spell him a little bit, so it takes a little bit of a load off of him, so he's not doing everything, especially coming off of those multiple injuries that he had last year. You want to lighten his load a little bit so you can keep him fresher and keep him more effective as the season goes on. So look at running back depth for the 49ers in the later rounds of the draft. I could also see them going corner because they do need some help at the corner position. There's a couple players still left in free agency. Asante Samuel Jr. is a guy. Another secondary player, Justin Simmons, who's played safety, can play corner as well. He's out there too. If they don't want to go that route and they want to just stick with the draft, maybe they draft a corner in the first round. Looking at Jahdae Barron possibly out of Texas, that could be an option if he's available when they pick. Or maybe they go edge rusher to pair with Nick Bosa. With Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. I could see him still being there when they pick in the first round. So maybe they go that route. Who knows? It'll depend on who's available when it's their turn to pick. But they do have a lot of needs. So we'll see if they end up, going that route. But the thing about the 49ers, in terms of their record and everything, I've kind of got like a mixed feeling on the 49ers because I believe that they have a lot of talent still on that team. I know they got a lot of guys that left during free agency or trades or, whatever the case, but there still are a lot of really good players on that team. And Brock Purdy, he's proven that he can be a solid quarterback. I mean, he led them to a Super Bowl a couple years ago, so he is a good quarterback. And, of course, they still have Brandon Ayuk if he comes back healthy. He's still a good player. And that kind of is what killed them last year, is just their injuries. If they can stay healthy, this is a playoff team, in my opinion. I truly believe that. With Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy, George Kittle, a solid offensive line, and Trent Williams still there, holding it down at that position. Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, you get all those guys back healthy, I think the 49ers could sneak into the playoffs this year. And it's kind of their pattern. They take a year off of the playoffs because they have a ton of injuries, and then the next year they'll get to the NFC Championship game. And then the following year they'll miss the playoffs because of injuries. And then the next year they'll get to the NFC Championship game. There was a pattern of that over the past few years. Obviously, I think that pattern has been broken since then, but there was a pattern at a time where the 49ers were either missing the playoffs entirely or getting to the NFC Championship game. So it's just kind of a weird thing. But that just shows you kind of their luck with injuries. They've not had the best luck with injuries overall over the past few years. But when they are healthy, they are one of the best teams in the league. They have proven that over the course of the last few years. So as far as what I think their record might be this year, it's going to all, of course, depend on health. As we talked about with this whole season outlook for the most part, injuries were the biggest reason why they struggled as much as they did last year. So if they can just stay healthy and add a couple pieces, maybe a couple other players in free agency that they want to pick up for depth or, something like that, or maybe they go in the draft, pick up a couple of key playmakers in the draft, I could absolutely see them going back to the playoffs. Don't know if they'll get all the way to the NFC Championship game like that previous pattern that they were on was, but I definitely think that they could sneak in as a wild card team. The Rams will be their biggest competition. Seattle, I just don't really know what I'm getting out of Seattle. Arizona, on the other hand, that's another team that interests me a little bit because, and we'll talk about them later in our last season outlook, but they kind of interest me from what they've done so far in free agency. If they can add a couple more pieces, they could sneak into the playoffs, and this division could end up being very, very competitive at the end of the day if everybody stays healthy in the division, of course, and if we end up getting a similar output from Sam Darnold in Seattle that we got when he was in Minnesota last year. Who knows? This could be a very entertaining division to watch. But I have the 49ers finishing second in that division. I do think they sneak in as a wild card team, and I've got them going 10-7. That's what I have them going. This is all bearing, of course, on the fact that they stay healthy. That's going to be the biggest obstacle for them to try and overcome. So we'll see if they can do it. I will, we'll of course return to this. Excuse me, if I can get the words out of my mouth. We'll return to this a little bit later, and see how close we were to this particular record. And of course, we'll check on it during the course of the season too and see how it goes. But before we go ahead and get into our next segment, which is diving into some of the playoff teams from last year and, whether or not they're going to make it or not. Before we do that, we're going to take another quick break. But just stick with us. We will be right back at the right after this break for the second or third segment of our show.